Okay, today we're going to work with the calorimetry experiment. We are going to be burning a nut, and the heat from the nut is going to go into the water, and we are going to measure the change of the water, and that's how we're going to determine how many calories was released by burning of the nut. And in our case, we're going to use almonds, but this also works for peanuts and pretty much any other food item. So you're going to start with a ring stand, just simply a stand with the ring attached. The next thing you're going to need is a soda can that has supports at the top to allow it to sit in the ring stand. Underneath, we are going to have a little stand which we are going to place our nut to be lit on top of. And then finally, in the very top, we're going to add a thermometer. Okay, so the thermometer is what we're going to use to measure the temperature change. So this is going to be the basic setup. The nut will be set on here, it will be lit, and it will go into the water when we put it in the can. So the next step is to put a known amount of water into the can. So for that, we are going to use our favorite little thing, the pipette. So we are going to take our 20 milliliter pipette, draw up 20 milliliters of water, much like we had in the previous experiment. And let it go. So we're going to put 20 mils of water into the can. Now keep in mind, when you're doing the calorimetry experiment, we're not so much interested in the volume of water, we're interested in the mass of the water. In this case, we're just going to assume that the mass of the water is equal to the volume because of the density. The density of water is 1, therefore putting in 25 milliliters is the same thing as depositing 25 grams of water into our can. So there we go, we've got 25 grams of water into the can. We'll take our thermometer, put it in there, make sure that we bring it up just off the bottom a little bit. Okay, we've got a rubber band or one of these blue things to help keep it up off the bottom of the can, but make sure that the tip of it is still in the water. Our next step is to take a piece of weighing paper, and this will be up front. Grab ourselves a food item. In this case, we're using a wasabi almond. And of course, we would weigh that. That's going to be the initial weight of our item to be burned. Once we have the mass of our initial uncooked almond, we will take our weighing paper, put it on the bottom, and then our stand on top of it. The reason that we put the weighing paper below the stand is because I want to make sure that any of the residue, any of the carbonized material that falls off actually collects, because we're going to have to weigh this almond afterwards. We'll put our almond on top of the stand. Lower down the can as low as you can, so as much heat as possible can go into it. And then finally, we're ready to go. So now that we're ready to go, I will read the initial temperature and record it in the notebook. And now that I have the initial temperature, I know the mass of water, and I know the specific heat, it's going to allow me to determine how many calories are released from this nut. So the next step is to take our match, light it, and catch that almond on fire. Normally I would keep the can here, but now I'm going to move it away just a little bit so you guys can actually see what's going on underneath. So I'm just applying a steady heat to this almond. You can see the smoke. There we go. It's lit on fire. Normally I would keep it there and let it heat up the water. Okay, now it's gone out. No big deal. Just take another match and light it up again. Once it's ignited, may take a little bit, that's fine. Once it's ignited, you can let it go and let it essentially transfer that heat from the nut into the water. So the heat going from the nut into the water is the amount of energy being released by this nut. Okay, we're going to watch as the heat applies to the can, we're going to see that this temperature starts to climb. As this temperature starts to climb, well, what's happening is the heat, the energy from the nut is being released, going into the water, and we're going to use this temperature change in order to measure the amount of calories released from the nut. So we'll let this go until it goes out. I'm going to blow it out just to speed things along. So now that I have transferred heat, the temperature of the water will still rise, and we're going to read it once it reaches a maximum. Okay, there's still some residual energy from the can transferring into the water, so this may rise just a little bit. Once it stops, that's our final temperature. Our final temperature minus the initial temperature before I lit the nut is going to be your change in temperature. So change in temperature times the mass of the water, 25 mils, times the specific heat of water, 1 calorie per gram degree C, and that's how we'll calculate the amount of calories released. Of course, you want to make sure that you take this back to the balance. Take off your nut if you can. Take this back to the balance and see how much of the nut you actually burned off.